It's time for another episode of I Am Northwest Arkansas, the podcast covering the intersection of business, culture, entrepreneurship, and life in general here in the Ozarks. Whether you are considering a move to this area or trying to learn more about the place you call home, we've got something special for you. Here's our host, Randy Wilburn.
Hey folks, and welcome to another episode of I Am Northwest Arkansas. I'm your host, Randy Wilburn, and I'm excited to be with you today, as I'm always. Today I'm sitting down with Brian Crowne, who is the owner of George's Majestic Lounge, and I believe you're still vice president of the Walmart AMP, or...
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, all right, because I wasn't exactly sure of the title, but when I last looked it up, it was there. So I'm excited because Brian was kind enough to come and speak to my Rotary, which is the downtown Fayetteville Rotary, best Rotary in Northwest Arkansas. Nothing against all the other Rotarians in the area, but I think we do the best job. Anyway, I'm messing around. But Brian came and he shared some amazing stories about his career and specifically how the AMP started. And I was really just kind of mesmerized by his storytelling. And I came up to him right away and I said, I'd love to have you on the podcast. Wasn't sure what he was going to say, but he agreed. And less than a week later, he's sitting in front of me here at the Center for Innovation in the Fayetteville Public Library, and we are having a conversation. So without further ado, I want to welcome Brian Crowne to the I Am Northwest Arkansas podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So listen, I'm not going to make you, we both have gray hairs and all that. I'm not going to make you go back into the annals of time to tell your whole superhero origin story, but why don't we start? Because it seems like in the late 90s, you're a musician.
Yes.
And you were traveling around. I think, as I read one article that talked about you were traveling around the Florida Riviera, playing a lot of joints and doing a lot of sets. And you came up here, you were here in Northwest Arkansas and you had some experiences at George's Majestic Lounge. And then things just kind of evolved from there, because are you originally you're from Fort Smith?
I grew up in Fort Smith, and I came to Fayetteville and played my first show here in late 1989 in the Florida Riviera. I'd spent the year prior to that based out of Pensacola, Florida, working the Panhandle. And like I said, found my way to Northwest Arkansas, and I was invited to sit in with a band in late 89 at George's and played their Friday Happy Hour. That was my first experience with live music in Fayetteville.
Yeah, and I remember you said something. One of the things I think that you remarked about when I read this particular article was that there was just something about the crowd that really stood out to you. And part of it was just the diversity of the crowd, the eclectic nature of the people that were there, and kind of, I guess, what that represented to you. Is that something that you noticed right away? Yeah,
it really struck me that, for sure, man. I grew up in Fort Smith and had performed in Florida, and it seemed like a lot of the places I had played, and I was just starting my musical careers, trying to make a living playing saxophone and guitar. But I still remember walking out on the stage there in the old outdoor George's Garden, and just, you nailed it, the diversity of folks that were there. And it's not like necessarily diversity of color. It was just diversity of lifestyles and people. And it still sticks with me today like it was yesterday, and it really resonated with me. It was really cool. It's one of the things that I've always loved about live music, whether I'm performing or the last, 15 plus years, as the guy that's putting on a lot of shows, is live music is such a melting pot for folks just to come and check out a reality, a day-to-day reality, and just, get to experience something special together.
Yeah, it really is. And my experience since I've come here, and I'm a huge music fan, and I can go back, I think anybody that has been to a live concert will remember their first concert. My first experience with a concert was the Police at Shea Stadium back in the day.
Wow.
Yeah. And then I also remember another formidable concert that I experienced was the Joshua Tree. When they came to Brendan Byrne Arena in New Jersey, which is right outside of the Meadowlands, right outside of New York City, and they performed there, and I was transformed after that. I mean, it was just a whole different experience. But there's just something about live music events that really sets you off and kind of puts you on a whole different plane.
I agree. U2 is one of those bands I haven't had a chance to catch live, but they're on my bucket list. So hopefully someday.
Yeah. Well, so, but you've had a chance to catch some really good acts live since you started with the AMP. Why don't you kind of walk us through? Obviously, I guess technically George's Majestic Lounge came first. How did you come to become the owner? You and your wife, along with some other folks, own George's Majestic Lounge?
Well, my wife and I are the sole owners now. But
okay.
I had became best friends with the previous owner's son, Ben Harrison, and he and I were roommates for a long time. And his parents, late Dr. Bill and his mother still alive, Betty Harrison, actually had their first date at George's in the 50s, and they bought the place from Mary Hinton. But fast forward, I always felt a kinship with that venue. I've been fortunate to play all over the country, and George's was always felt like a pretty special room to me. And, I asked them, I said, if you ever decide to get rid of it, I don't know if I can facilitate it, but give me a chance, And they came to me in 2003 and said, we're going to sell, and we wanted you to have first shot at it. And I was blessed to have a very dear friend of mine, a lady named Susie Stevens, who's kind of like my second mom, was able to financially facilitate it because, I'd made a living as a musician, which means I wasn't a rich guy. And I remember telling Susie, if we can pull this off, I may not be able to make it go, but if you own the dirt, you're never going to lose any money. And so my wife and I bought the business from her. And then in 2012, I believe, or 11 or 12, we ended up purchasing the property as well. So, I'm going into my 18th year of my 3 to 5 year plan for George's. And so it's been a blessing. It's a lot of great history there. And, we're in our 95th year in business. And I like to tell people, if my wife and I do our job as owners, we're more like the curators of this generation, and it'll be here for somebody else.
Right. So, yeah, and I was reading that. I was reading, and I was doing the math in my head, which, you shouldn't do, but 95 years it's been around.
Yeah, and we're the fourth owners. So, to me, I've always resonated with me that only 4 people have owned that business in almost 100 years, which leads, I think the people that owned it before us cared about it kind of like we care about it. It's definitely, part of the community.
And what was George's claim to fame like back in the 50s or 40s or 30s? Was it just I don't know, not necessarily a juke joint, but just, what stood out about it?
I think it's probably it stood out in different decades for different reasons, always a place that was welcoming. George Pappas opened it in 27 with his brother, and it was a little bit of a general store and railroad cafe. I've been told by some old timers, which I'm closely soon becoming one, I guess, that there were social events there as far back as the 30s. And I know it's had music off and on since the 40s and 50s, but music kind of became more of a primary focus, from what I understand, probably in the early to mid 70s.
Yeah.
And then when we got it, music was my background. I was a musician and a writer and a producer, nothing famous, but, I focused on music because I felt like that's what I knew.
Right.
And so definitely the last 20 years, it's been about the music. And, we don't open if we don't have a concert or special event. We haven't for a decade, So, yes, we're a venue that sells alcohol, but we're not your Dixon Street bar that opens up. So,
yeah. So would a graduate from the U of A from the 80s and a graduate from the U of A of the 2000s have a different feeling about George's Majestic Lounge?
Yeah, I think they would. They would have similar experiences as probably experiencing social and live music events in the 80s. But, we kind of became the premier showcase venue for this region for a venue of our size. So hosting everything from, local new artists to, Grammy winners that have came through and performed with us. So I guess it's just a fact. It sounds like I'm not trying to brag or anything, but we definitely took the concert experience there to another level. So, but I think music would be familiar to both those generations, but definitely of the 2000s and forward, because, we've just, good Lord, just thousands of shows that I've done over the years.
You start to lose, it blurs after a while, the numbers do. I know I was telling you about the number of podcasts that I've done, and after a while I look up and I'm like, man, they just blend into each other. So it's kind of hard, but you keep going, you have that desire to bring the best to Northwest Arkansas so people can experience that great talent.
Yeah, I agree. There's days that I feel like it's a grind, and there's days that it's awesome. I'm sure that's the same with anybody's, what they're doing for a living. But, I like to say, I still feel the same way I do when I was a musician. I would tell people my worst day on stage was better than my best day at any day job I had before. And, and I've been blessed to be in the music and event industry for, 34 years now.
Yeah. Now, I think you told a story about a young Taylor Swift. Was she performing at George's Majestic Lounge, or was she performing at the Amp?
No, she's not performed at the Amp. When she was first coming out, her agent reached out and she wanted to play George's.
Okay.
And at the time I thought, her target fan base is probably 13 to 15 years old, and that's probably not going to be the right place. And I actually sent them to a friend of mine her dad was putting on concerts on top of Mount Sequoia. And the first time she came through, did an acoustic show, was at the old Methodist camp up on top of Mount Sequoia. And the next time she came through Fayetteville, she played the Track Center to a sold-out show with about 8,500 people. And now if she ever comes back to Northwest Arkansas, it'll probably be Razorback Stadium because even the
easily.
amp, we can't make enough money in tickets to pay her.
Oh, man. Well, you would hope. I mean, because I know we've got Garth Brooks coming this spring.
Razorback Stadium. Yes.
Right, to Razorback Stadium. Is he going to be the biggest act that has come and performed at Razorback Stadium that you're aware of?
Publicly, to my knowledge, it'll be the first public concert that's been in Razorback Stadium.
Okay.
The only one that happened prior was probably about, 10 years ago, I think, during Walmart's shareholders meeting. They had Buffett and Carrie Underwood and Keith Urban played, but that was just for shareholders.
Yeah, so it wasn't open to the public.
No, and it'll definitely be the most tickets it's ever sold for a concert in Arkansas.
I'm sure.
75,000 tickets.
Yeah, that's going to be exciting to see. So yeah, maybe she will come back. And do you keep in touch with her agent, or do you not really?
Nah, not hers. I mean, I shouldn't say that. I mean, agents represent a lot of artists, so I might be in touch with them and don't even realize it. Right.
That's interesting. Yeah, I think she has a very interesting story and everything about, her back catalog of music and what she has done in the recent past to kind of take control of her own destiny has been pretty interesting, to say the least.
Yeah, it's been interesting. One thing that's intrigued me about her since she first started out is that, she writes her own music and she never claimed to be the best singer, but she really was, I think, a very talented writer and obviously a really cool performer as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, there's a lot of young ladies out there that she has been an extremely large role model for. So
indeed, carried herself well.
Yeah, absolutely. So how did you decided at some point, and I'm just trying to think of the process here. At some point, did you say, you know what? I need bigger places. I need bigger venues to have concerts. How did the whole AMP thing come about? How did you decide to do that?
Well, the AMP came about not because I decided to. I guess I decided to when we bought it from the previous owners. But like I said, at Rotary, the AMP was the brainchild of a gentleman named Dan White, who was Tyson executive at the time. And we actually hosted a Tyson sales event at George's, and the whole place was rented out. It was, tour buses showing up, dropping off salesmen, and I was out on Dixon Street with Don Tyson directing traffic. Anyway, became friends with Dan, and he started hanging out on Fridays, and we would chat, and he talked about missing the summer concerts he used to watch when he grew up in upstate New York. And so he put together a group, and they bought this big tent, and they opened Arkansas Music Pavilion, which is what AMP stands for, in June of 2005. And I actually booked the very first show. It's kind of interesting that I'm still around with the Doobie Brothers, and my band Oriole Blue at the time opened the show. And then fast forward, he took a job with Coke, so he's an executive in Atlanta. And in 2007, I believe he reached out to him. He says, "Hey, man, you ought to buy the AMP from us." And at the time, you saying looking for bigger places. Yes, George's only has so much capacity, and the artist outgrows me. I had done some shows at the Fayetteville Town Center, and I said, "Man, I don't need to own a big tent." But I met with him, and I looked at the numbers, and I thought, there might be a little room for improvement. Maybe I can give it a go. And so our friend Susie Stevens, again, her and I, my wife, purchased the AMP assets and brands because it was kind of a natural growth cycle for me as a promoter. It's weird saying promoter because that used to be a dirty word, but
right.
So opportunity to grow with artists. They start in my front room, they go to the back room at George's, and then we grow them bigger. And in 2008, I thought I had it figured out, and we signed the deal to buy a tent, and that was when we entered the Great Recessions and banks were going under. And I thoroughly convinced myself, I think I had a nervous breakdown that summer and thought I'd bankrupt my family for, pushing too hard. And I don't know how much money we lost that first year. And the second year we broke even. And the third year we had the AMP. I think I made lunch money. But through that whole process, we were able to bring new artists to Northwest Arkansas and kind of help get it on the map. So, yeah, growth, I guess a long answer to a short question was growth opportunity as a promoter.
Yeah.
And trying to be, at that time, kind of one-stop shop in Northwest Arkansas. An agent and an artist can have a relationship with me in a laddered approach.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I don't look at it even as luck for you that you were able to stumble upon another great opportunity. The first time you basically asked for the first right of refusal and you said, "Hey, if you ever decide to sell, let me know," which I always tell people all the time. It never hurts to say that to somebody if you're interested in a house or a business or whatever, because you just never know when you might get that call and somebody says to you, "Hey, are you interested in buying? I'm going to give you the first chance or first crack at it." And you never actually communicated that to the former owner of the AMP before. Did he just reach out to you?
He reached out to me, but we'd stayed in touch,
Yeah.
and he's, somebody that I still consider to be a friend. And I think he was living in Atlanta. He wanted to offload an asset and knew that he wasn't going to be able to be here to take care of it like it was before. And I was probably just the natural choice. Hey, if somebody in Northwest Arkansas might want to do this,
Right.
I'm going to give Crowne a call and give him the first shot, even though I didn't ask for first right on that. I was just the one that probably made the most sense. Yeah, and you're definitely right, man. I tell people all the time, life is full of opportunities, and and it's what you make of them sometimes would help you end up wherever you're going to end up in life. And I've been blessed to have some cool opportunity put in front of me.
Yeah, and it's so funny. And I mean, just not to go off on a tangent, but a lot of people were asking me, well, how did you get so-and-so to be on your podcast or so-and-so? And I'm like, I just asked. I mean, it's like all they could do. I was sitting there having lunch as you were talking. And I was like, I need to ask this guy. And then at first, part of me was like, he doesn't have time. He's going to tell you no or whatever. And then I just came up to ask you. And you were like, sure. And then by that end of that afternoon, we already had this book. So
yeah, it was fun, man. I mean, and I was invited to speak at Rotary years ago, and I didn't do it for some reason, but I really, really enjoyed it and met some really cool people there, you being one of them. And, you're an easy person to say yes to because I just thought, yeah, it's probably going to be a fun conversation.
Right. Well, I appreciate that. So you start out, the amp starts out in 2005, literally a tent. And in my mind, I'm looking at this tent and I'm thinking one of those big white tents that you have to, storage and everything else. I mean, you've got to put it somewhere when you're not using it.
That's the first question I asked my friend Dan. I go, where do you put all of it? It was a 22,000 square foot tent that looked like a flying saucer. It was really a pretty incredible, unique structure. They still make that saddle span tent to this day, and they use them around the world. But the first question I asked him, I said, where do you put everything? And he said, well, we've got this great sponsor, a great partner, Rick Whittle with Whittle Truck Sales. And everything got folded up and put in 7 semi-trailers for the off-season. And I thought, okay, well, you're not paying for a warehouse. There's one good check. There's a pro.
Right. And it just kind of went from there.
Yeah.
So did you originally, when you took it over, did you think, hey, you know what, this will be great here? Or did you envision what we see today when you ride down? And for those of you that are listening to this, because of course, Brian, we have a lot of listeners that are thinking about moving to Northwest Arkansas, haven't quite come here yet, or maybe they have visited on a job visit or, a relocation trip. But, if you see it, you can't miss it. You ride through Rogers. As soon as you leave Bentonville and you ride through Rogers, you're going to see on one side of the highway of I-49, you're going to see a huge Top Golf facility. And right next to that facility, which is a great marker, by the way, now, is the Walmart Amp, which is now what it's called. Did you originally plan to keep it in Fayetteville before moving it up to Rogers?
Well, first of all, no, I never dreamed of what we have right now. And we originally had intended to stay in Fayetteville even after the Walton Art Center purchased the AMP brand and assets from us with the intent to try to build at the mall where we're at. So, when we found ourselves not able to stay at the mall, homeless, so to speak, with a big tent, we had the opportunity to build in Rogers. And when we had that opportunity to build there with kind, generous donation from Mrs. Hunt and her family, we were able to dream a little bit bigger than we were originally. So blessings in disguise on that one. It was just, once again, talking about opportunity.
Yeah.
We were looking for a place to pop a tent and asked about setting one up behind Pinnacle Mall, and then met Mrs. Hunt, and she said, would you consider building here? And it was like, holy cow, well, we're going to have to rethink this. So what was going to be a $1.5 million project, grew into a $12 million build. And it's something I never dreamed of, as well as, I found myself working with the architects, helping design the venue. And the old musician in me thought, man, what am I doing helping design a venue? But yeah, it's pretty special. You talk about people thinking about moving to Northwest Arkansas. I've been saying this a lot. I don't know if I said it at Rotary the other day, but I tell people, I describe it as a small town vibe with world-class amenities in every level, whether it's arts, culinary, entertainment, culture, education. Cost of living is incredible here. It's a pretty special place. And, I would have never dreamed Northwest Arkansas would grow the way it has. So it's been pretty cool to be along for the ride so far.
No, absolutely. And so just for people's timeline, the AMP started in 2005. You took it over in 2007, in 2008, and endured it at the worst time ever. For those of you that don't remember, there was a little bit of a financial backspin that we all took and we all felt, and it was rough, akin to the pandemic, but different. It's hard to explain, but it was just different. And you stewarded the AMP through that, and then opportunities presented themselves for you guys to relocate up to Rogers. And then you've built this beautiful facility now, and you've even come to the place where you guys just did kind of not a rehab, but you just did some upgrades to it recently, right?
Yeah, we did a $17 million expansion, and it really wasn't to add capacity. We added about 1,000 capacity to the whole building. We had an opportunity to invest in a wonderful facility by adding a lot of plaza space, more restrooms, more concessions, and we were also able to add a new artist wing backstage. So we got to invest in the patrons and the artists as well
at the same time. Yeah, I've been to the AMP for one event, and it was a glorious event. I got to see Santana, and I sat right next to Miss Hunt's box, and so you know where that's.
I know right where you're at.
Exactly. So because somebody said that's Miss Hunt's box right there. I was in the Tyson box, and I was sitting right next to Miss Hunt's box, and I was like, wow, this is pretty nice, and it was. First of all, Santana is one of my favorite performers, and he put on a show. I mean, it was outstanding.
Yeah, I remember it like it was last night, man. One of my favorite artists as well, and I didn't know what to expect. I mean, I knew it was going to be good, but my goodness, how good it was. The weather was beautiful that night, and his band was phenomenal, and he was just his whole band and crew, they were just class act, man.
Got to see one of the top drummers in the world and his wife. I mean,
she's a beast.
She is outstanding. So, yeah. I mean, if you know about drummers and she is, and her name is escaping me right now, but she is all that and then some. So, I mean, it was glorious to see her riff for a period there. And it was really, really, really a phenomenal concert all the way around. I would say the experience that I got to go to a tent because, again, I was hanging out with some Tyson folks, and they really treated me well there, and they took me to a tent where there was just wonderful food, just an assortment of drinks. I mean, it was just a good experience.
That's our Land O'Lakes sponsor lounge,
right? Yeah,
and that's a 100-foot tent, house left, stage right. I appreciate that you enjoyed those amenities because that's something that we've put a lot of effort and heart into having folks that are coming to that space with us have a great experience.
Yeah, and I will say this too, and I didn't get to experience the lawn, but even the sight lines at the lawn on the lawn part of the AMP are amazing, and it's just, I mean, there's not a bad seat in the house.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth, man. It's not a bad seat in the house. And, we've also invested in our outfield speakers, our lawn delays. So, the audio coverage all over the building is really good too.
Yeah, that's exciting. So, it's hard to, I mean, there's so many directions I'd love to go, but I want to talk about a couple of things. One, obviously, with you guys are in a prime location now, and with real estate growing the way that it is in Northwest Arkansas, I mean, dirt is expensive. And so you're in a prime location. Do you ever see yourself outgrowing what you have right now, or is that not, I mean, is what you have right now sufficient for where we see Northwest Arkansas going in the near future?
I don't see us outgrowing that. I mean, we put a lot of thought into what size venue we thought Northwest Arkansas needed at the time and will need.
Yeah.
And, 20,000 cap was probably the 20 to 30-year-old model around the country. 10, 11,000 cap, which is where we're at, we felt like was the right size for this market, and we still feel that way.
Yeah.
I think if something goes past us, it's probably going to be an indoor arena. Some acts don't play outside, some do. Or Razorback Stadium. So I think we're not quite what would be considered a boutique amphitheater in the industry at probably about 7,000 cap. And we're not a large one, at 15 or 20,000. So I see us as being the right size. And, there's, a few times where I wish I could sell about 2,000 more tickets so I could get a little more money to pay this artist. But,
right.
I think we're the right size for the market. And as the market grows, like Garth Brooks playing Razorback Stadium. I mean, he's playing in the round of 75,000 people, but you could also play out of the south end zone, and scale to, 25, 35, 45,000 and go up. So there really is kind of another venue option there in Northwest Arkansas with the stadium as well.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when you think of it, and I remember recently, and this was just probably, during the pandemic, because I would imagine, I want to ask you about that in a second, but I remember it was a rainy night, and I was very disappointed that I didn't have tickets for Dave Matthews, because I've seen Dave Matthews in some amazing venues, and they put on a great concert. And it was raining profusely, but I talked to several people that went to that concert, and they said it was a great show. Even with the torrential rain that was coming down, people had a really good time at that particular show.
Yeah, that one, if that was when he came in 15, was the first time we had him.
Right.
I got introduced to him when I was dating my wife 20 years ago, and I took her to Memphis in May, and we got to see him. But yeah, that rain came in toward the end of his show, and his encore of Watchtower from Hendrix. I guess, is that Hendrix or Dylan wrote that song? But anyway.
Well, Hendrix played it the best. I think,
no, there's no question with that. But anyway. Yeah, there's been some, that was a biblical scale rain that came in, but fortunately it wasn't lightning, and it was still safe. And yeah. I think it may have just added to the experience of those folks that were on the lawn, because, Dave just owned them, man, in a good way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, and several of my friends that went, they were like, it was amazing. The concert, everything was great. They weren't sure what to expect, but they said everybody was really helpful. And I must say that the staff that you guys have there, again, keeping in mind that they don't work technically year round, because there are times when the amp isn't open for business, right? I mean, we have core full-time staff, but when we have let's say we have a sold-out show, we could be employing anywhere from 400 to 500 people on that day, and probably 95% of those are part-time folks, whether it's front of house ushers, whether it's ticket takers, it's stage crew. And I appreciate you saying you've had a good experience, because I really feel that we've built the brand of the amp regionally and nationally in the industry by the way we treat people. It's with hospitality and with professionalism, and we never get complacent from that standpoint at all. Yeah. No, it's not like, it's just been a really good experience every time that I've been to or what I've experienced at the amp has been a really good experience. Now, how did the pandemic redefine what you guys have been doing with the amp, with everything that was going on?
That's a good question. It started with a gut check.
Absolutely.
And for everybody around the world, as we're still coming out of it. I don't know if it, I'm going to speak for me. I won't speak for just the whole organization, but, it was surreal to say the least.
Yeah.
It was scary, because you don't know, are you going to be able to make it to the other side, financially, physically? For me, having live entertainment and live events and gatherings taken away from us for so long, it put it in my mind, how it made me realize and appreciate even more how important, live music and arts and culture are to our overall mental health, our overall health and well-being. So we didn't redefine us, but it made me even more proud of what we do. And the commitment, I think, even had more resolve from myself and everybody in our organization to get through it, to be here on the other side of the pandemic, to provide what we provided in Northwest Arkansas. And even in, I believe it was September of 2020, we started doing a happy hour concert series in the new Choctaw Plaza on the north side. I reached out to part of our Ghostlight Recovery campaign. I reached out to a lot of regional bands that I worked with at George's, and they came through and played for basically about, a nickel on the dollar of what they normally would to help us raise money to keep the organization going. So that was interesting. Once again, I'm giving you a rambling answer to a short question, but not redefining this. What was kind of fun is I was able to look at the amp as what kind of venues are inside a venue.
Yeah.
So you take that new North Plaza, and we could set it up and do this cool club style happy hour show. And I was able to put bands back to work and put people back to work. So I don't say it didn't redefine us, but it made our resolve even more to make sure that we're going to be here on the other side to do what we do best.
Man, listen, I think in general with the pandemic, I mean, I granted, I understand how devastating it has been for the world, period, let alone the United States and the number of people that passed away here or died due to COVID-19. But, I think the resolve of Americans as a whole has been tested, and we've shown our mettle through this whole pandemic. And, when I think of things like, I remember that, looking at everybody got to a place where they got creative about how they dealt with the situation. I think of like the Tiny Desk concert series, which was phenomenal, by the way. I don't know if you've got a chance to see any of those videos.
Yeah, I'm familiar
online.
with it.
Yeah. So, I mean, I just saw, especially for musicians and for artists, a way of not losing their connection with their audience. And of course, like you said, live concerts are huge. And I've been reading where 2022 is going to be big, but they're saying 23 and 24 are going to be huge years for concerts because everybody's trying to get back on the road and get out there. So I can only imagine that you're just trying to figure out how you can fill up the calendar.
I'm not trying to figure out how I can fill it up. I'm trying to figure out how not to have it 100% full. I feel like an air traffic controller drinking water from a fire hose right now.
Really?
In the amp world, yeah. I mean, we got 33 confirmed concerts this year. That's already a record. But you're right. More people are getting back on the road. And it really was cool watching artists of all types find a way to stay connected to their fan base, to stay connected to their sanity. I mean, it's and some of those things are still, I think people are still using some of those new ways to connect, which is, is cool. And I agree with you. I think that we showed our mettle as a country, and it was good to see generally the better part of humanity than the other side of it.
Sure.
As well.
Sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. So what are Brian Crowne's hopes for the future?
Oh man. First and foremost, God's blessed me with an amazing wife and two beautiful sons.
That's awesome.
I start every day just so simple. I thank God for those blessings. And, so, that sounds cliche, but it's real. That's what motivates me. It's family and people I care about and community. So what are my hopes and dreams? My hopes and dreams are that, my family stays healthy and I get to keep doing, something that, I love. And that's bringing people together to help them smile and help them have a good time. And I gave an interview about George's right before the shutdown in 2020. And I still remember the last question that young journalist asked me. They said, what do you want for the future of George's? And it was like, quick, man, relevance.
Yeah.
I don't want to be running a legacy business and get complacent. And as long as, I want relevance for George's, I want relevance for live music. I want to maintain relevance for the Walton Arts Center and Walmart Amp. So, that's kind of what my hopes and dreams are starts with my family. I want them healthy and safe and still putting up with me.
Yeah.
And I think never be complacent and just appreciate the simple things and get to do the cool things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Brian, you nailed it on the head for sure. And you've done great work with both George's Majestic Lounge and the Amp, the Walmart Amp. And, it's not easy doing what you're doing, especially when you deal with so many different moving parts with live performances. And that's the thing about it. Because I had a friend that was a roadie, and he told me everything that went into moving it from one city to the next and all the logistics. And it just made my head spin. But I mean, just doing what you do on a day in and day out basis, I certainly commend you and your wife and the rest of the team that keeps things going and keeps live music relevant here in Northwest Arkansas. So I just want to say personally, thank you for all that you're doing. And I want to encourage people that are listening to this. If you want to check out a great venue, you need to go to George's Majestic Lounge right down on Dixon. And then certainly any event that you see online for the Walmart Amp that you can buy tickets for, you should definitely do that. I know there's a Black Panther event happening or it just happened?
No, it's coming up. Actually, it's going to be our first event this year that's public, April 15th.
Okay.
We're actually going to show the movie The Black Panther on a huge video screen above an orchestra that's going to be playing the soundtrack and score live.
Now, Sona, is that Sona playing or?
It'll be, a bulk of it will be Sona, yes,
okay.
But I'm not sure if it's going to be 100% them or not. But that's a pretty neat symphonic event. We've done that with Harry Potter and Star Wars. And
I saw the Star Wars one I had some friends go to, and they said it was insanely good. So
it was really cool. And, it's a trip for me. It's like you watch it. My wife and kids went to that one. But what's interesting when you're watching the movie, you're watching the orchestra, then all of a sudden you kind of forget they're playing it live at the same time. So,
right.
Yeah, it's a neat deal.
That's awesome. So, well, listen, I will wait like a lot of us will with bated breath to see what is announced for 23 and beyond, because I'm sure there's going to be some other amazing acts that are going to end up here at the Amp. And you've got, like you said, a full slate for 2022. So I want to encourage everybody to check out the website. Whatever isn't sold out, you need to get some tickets to go see a show. And remember, you're not only supporting George and what he's doing, but you're supporting all those people that work for George, work with George on a regular basis. And in the same way that we've been supporting our local restaurants and other service organizations, the Amp falls under that umbrella. And so we really appreciate all the hard work that you're putting in to make things happen and to create opportunities for people to have a good paying job where they can go and have some fun and give back to the community at the same time.
Well, I appreciate it. Yeah, it's definitely, having George's is kind of like the home base, but you're right. It's a ripple effect in the economy, and excited to be doing it. And if you're interested in tickets to Walmart Amp, you can go to amptickets.com. And if you're interested in events and tickets that are happening at George's, you can go to georgeslive.com.
Yeah. And I'll make sure all of that's on the show notes so that you guys know where to go. You can just click the show notes no matter what podcast platform you're listening to this on, and just check out that information and click on the link right there and check out everything that's happening at George's Majestic Lounge or at the Walmart Amp.
And support arts, culture, and live entertainment in general all over Northwest Arkansas. I mean, I'm proud of those two buildings that I have something to do with, but there's a lot of great stuff happening regionally too. Yeah, no, you look around. I mean, there are some. I mean, Ludacris, Snoop Dogg. I mean, there's some big people coming to Northwest Arkansas that I've been told by people that have been here for a long time that said a lot of those people never stopped in this area, and so you're seeing a lot more activity from that perspective. Yeah, I like to think that Walmart Amp has had a big part of putting Northwest Arkansas on everybody's radar in that world, whether it was, Janet Jackson to the artist you're just talking about. Right. It's pretty crazy. I work with one guy one of my Live Nation partners, and he likes to tell people if I could buy stock in Northwest Arkansas, I'd invest everything I have in it. Listen, I feel like that, and I'm doubling down. That's why I do this podcast on a regular basis and bring amazing people like you on. So, Brian, thank you so much for spending a little bit of time with us today and with the I Am Northwest Arkansas audience. Once again, appreciate you having me, man. It's been fun. Absolutely. Well, folks, there you have it. Another episode of I Am Northwest Arkansas. I hope you enjoyed it. Brian is a great guy, and really what you see is what you get. So I would encourage you, check him out, support what he's doing at both George's Majestic Lounge and the Walmart Amp. If you have any questions, you can also check out the show notes on the website, iamnorthwestarkansas.com. Remember, our episode comes out every Monday, rain or shine. So we appreciate you guys, and we'll see you right here next week. Peace.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of I Am Northwest Arkansas. Check us out each and every week, available anywhere that great podcasts can be found. For show notes or more information on becoming a guest, visit iamnorthwestarkansas.com. We'll see you next week on I Am Northwest Arkansas.